At Salesforce, we believe that business is a platform for change. That's why we've built a clean, carbon-neutral cloud, operate as a net zero company, and will reach 100% renewable energy by 2022. So when it came time to build a new headquarters, we went big, really big. But in terms of its footprint, the Salesforce Tower is tiny. It's on track to be double LEED Platinum certified and sources 100% renewable energy. It outperforms city energy guidelines by more than 20%. Will feature the largest blackwater system of its kind in North America, saving 30,000 gallons of water a day. And the Salesforce Ohana working inside it, they're spending thousands of hours volunteering in the environment each year. Because the business of business is to make the world a better place.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Philanthropy Officer and EVP Corporate Relations, Salesforce, Suzanne DiBianca.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. This is our second and our first ever climate summit here at Dreamforce, our second session. We've got another one right after this around multi-stakeholder dialogue as it relates to climate action. So we hope that you will also join us for that. But thank you again for being here, and you're here to learn about water. This is critical. I don't know how many people saw Al Gore this morning? Right? He was amazing. He's always amazing. Always incredible to me how he can always stay so current in his slideshow, like current, like what's happening yesterday, current. And he talked a bit about water in his speech and the importance and what's happening in the oceans. And so this is a bit of a sort of a follow-on to that session. My job, again, is just to sort of introduce a rock star panel. We have been thinking a lot about water in our own company. You saw in the video about the Blackwater system that we put into the Salesforce Tower, which saves 70 million gallons of water annually. It's fantastic. It's the largest of its kind in North America. Here at Dreamforce, we had no beef on the menu this year, so sorry if you're a beef person. I can be known as one also, but we're very committed to making sure that we're doing our best to sort of decarbonize Dreamforce and really leverage all of our resources. And just as a result of not serving beef, we've saved 10 million gallons of water here at Dreamforce this week also. So thank you. And again, you're here to learn about water and the criticality of the systems. And I'm going to bring up an incredible leading panel of experts in this field. And first, I'm reading this because it's kind of day 3 at Dreamforce, and I want to make sure that I get it right. And I have deep respect for all of our panelists. The first who'll be moderating the panel is SYLVIA EARLE, CEO of Mission Blue, and a leading marine biologist. Second is ADRIAN GRENIER, actor, activist. I had the opportunity earlier in the year to interview him at our Connections conference. Please come, Sylvia. Have a seat. Yep. So you'll hear from Adrian all about his awesome organization called the Lonely Whale Foundation. Next is NAINOA Thompson. There's NAINOA, incredible Voyager. He has the unique perspective of a Voyager and the first person in 600 years to practice the ancient Polynesian art of navigation. And he'll tell you all about that. And then finally, we have with us Alexis Haas. Alexis, where are you? Come on out. She is the Director of Sustainability for Adidas, a great Salesforce customer, and has generated, amongst other things, an incredible partnership with Parlay. And they're making a lot of apparel out of oceans plastics. So thank you all for being here. And Sylvia, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank all of you for coming here to tune in and turn on about the issues relating to the ocean, climate, and the future of whoever we are, wherever we are in the universe. Over the weekend, I was privileged to spend a bit of time with the individual, an astronaut, who took an image that has changed the way we think about ourselves, and that is Earthrise, William Anders, the astronaut, who, with others who have been far up beyond our atmosphere, have looked back and given us new ways of thinking about ourselves and our place in the universe. So try to imagine that image of Earth as it was viewed from the moon in 1968, 50 years ago, on the 24th of December, soon be exactly 50 years ago, that image was taken. When I was a child, no one had that image of Earth from space, but the kids of today grow up knowing, or at least they have access to knowledge, that shows that here we are, this blue, really blue place in a universe of really hostile other places. As beautiful as they are, they're not suitable for us or for the rest of life on Earth. And the key is what this panel will be exploring, and that is water. 97% of it is in the ocean. That small other fraction is largely tied up in polar ice, 3%. And 3% of that is fresh water, is in all the lakes, the rivers, the streams, in clouds, in you and me, and cats and dogs and other living things. Water is what makes life possible. And Earth is blessed with a lot of it, or it seems that way until you really do the numbers and realize how vulnerable everything we care about is, because the water is important, critical, and it looks vast from our perspective as little terrestrial beings, but it is vulnerable to the actions that have been taken by us largely in the last 50 years. And as we explore with our comments, I think that idea that in the lifetime of people who are still here and remember what it was like 50 years ago, or they can remember through their parents or their grandparents, it's a piece of time that we can embrace and understand. And we can also imagine, okay, here we are at a pivotal point in time, armed with knowledge that could not exist before right about now. And if we are smart as we sometimes think we are, we will use that knowledge to imagine, if we keep doing what we're doing, where will we wind up in the next 5, 10, 50 years, or on beyond through the next 10,000 years, because this is a moment in time when we are armed with the power of knowledge that, as never before, gives us cause for hope. We know, but do we have the will to take what we know and apply it to make the shift from what we have been witnessing, certainly in my lifetime, a degradation of the natural systems, land, sky, the wild creatures who share Earth with us, certainly the ocean? Do we have the will to change our ways, the habits that have grown up and become policies born of another time when we did not know what we now know, could not see what we now see? So, I would like to call on ADRIAN to give his perspective. ADRIAN is an actor, for heaven's sakes. What's he doing? Celebrating trails and water and the environment. Well, ADRIAN, you're an example of an individual using your powers to make a difference. And the thing is, knowing that everyone has power, you just have to find it. We all have superpowers compared to those who existed a century ago, because they did not know what we now know, that kids now know. and that you know. So could you share with us your ideas of why you're doing what you're doing, and where do you think we might be going, armed with what we now know?
Oh, well, Sylvia, I must say, I'm quite intimidated to be asked that question by you. I was very, very mesmerized by what you were saying, and as always, very inspired by leaders such as yourself. So you're one of the reasons why I do what I do. And I was lucky enough to go scuba diving with Sylvia several years back, and to watch a woman as powerful as Sylvia continue daily committed to bringing attention to the world's oceans and spreading the word, the love, the wisdom, and also carrying her own scuba gear. She refused my help on several occasions. Just shows you the kind of commitment and passion from somebody who cares that deeply. So that's an inspiration, absolutely. And of course, if I can strive to be as vigilant and committed as you, I'll be happy. And I guess what I'm trying to do is bring that same perspective to perhaps an audience that may not like to go scuba diving, hasn't seen firsthand the destruction in the ocean. Because anybody who's been under the water will start to see the imperative. They'll start to know firsthand how important this kind of work is. The problem with the ocean is it's so vast, it's so far out of sight, out of mind, it doesn't relate to our everyday experience, or at least the most of us. So when I started looking at the problems in the ocean and trying to figure out how I could bring a new perspective to it, I said, well, how do we get people who are so far removed, so distracted by media and television and the things that I'm doing, and paying attention to celebrity and Hollywood and just inundated on a daily basis with their cell phones and images, how do we get them to empathize and care more? How do we really spark that sense of connection to this world that is really so abstract but so beautiful and so worth saving? So that's when I started Lonely Whale, who's inspired by our hero mascot, who is 52, the loneliest whale in the world, who is speaking at a different language than other whales, but seeking that connection. And so that's what we set out to do, to bring people closer to the world's oceans and build that empathy. Because really, only together can we really make a change. As individuals, we can only do so much, but together we can create an enormous wave of change.
Alexis Haas, I'd love to have you weigh in. Together, you know, it's the arts, it's science, it's whoever you are, and it's certainly business, industry. It's the driving force of civilization, the entrepreneurial spirit of creating ways of fostering our prosperity. You have worked in various parts of the business community, but are now with Adidas, and I really admire your shoes. You need to tell us about those shoes and your relationship with Parley that celebrates a partnership that is having an impact.
Thanks. Again, I actually share the admiration for you, so thank you very much for inviting us here. And I think actually one of the things that you just said resonates pretty strongly with me, which is we have a particular outlet that, as a business, we can reach a lot of people. And our founder actually had the privilege of working with a lot of really amazing and inspirational athletes. And when you have a company that's a sports company, it tends to drive a lot of inspiration for people. It tends to access an emotion with folks. And that's core to how our belief is. Through sport, we believe we have the power to change lives. And so we're actually just trying to use that same platform to not only create a big amount of change in the world by taking ocean plastic off of beaches, putting it into shoes and products, but also to talk to people about it. And so give people an avenue to understand this topic. What's going on with the plastic crisis in the ocean? Why we have a plastic crisis? And we're actually trying to use the levers of business, so not the inspiration only of sports, but also the levers of competition, to try and create a pull and a demand to pull plastic off of beaches, pull it into our supply chain, and turn it into our products. Most people don't realize this, but actually you could refer to Adidas as a plastics company. For performance product, a lot of it is made out of materials like polyester, and you can actually make those from recycling plastic bottles. So there's 11 plastic bottles that came off of beaches in my shoes. And we're just trying to tell people about that.
There you go.
So the reason I hold up this shoe is because way back in 2015, we actually met Parley, and we had a wonderful experience together trying to dream up how we could not only use plastic, but reinvent how plastic is made. And we did a collaboration where we went to the UN together to talk about that. And in my company, you can't show up anywhere without a shoe. And we didn't have a shoe. So we used some of the latest technology that we had to turn fishing nets and plastic into a sneaker. And then the very predictable response was, where can I get those shoes?
They're
So
really cool.
we managed to build up a supply chain, and this year we've created 5 million pairs. We're on track next year for 10 to 11 million. And we've actually made a commitment to do 100% recycled polyester by 2024. So we're just trying to use the normal supply and demand and the levers that our business and the microphone that we have to tell people that there's actually a good and positive, desirable solution to this crisis.
Well, I come from the pre-Plasticozoic era. 50 years ago, plastic was rare and cherished. Today, it's the basis of our throwaway society. What do you do with something once you're through with it? We used to think that we could throw it away, but now we know there is no away. Okay, so now, a few decades after this revolutionary, amazing capacity to develop synthetic materials that have served humankind so well in so many ways, but the ocean is clogged with our throwaway plastics and our throwaway other stuff as well. Toxic materials that we allow to flow into the sea and from the sky because of the introduction of carbon dioxide in excess. We need some carbon dioxide to power photosynthesis, which, oh, by the way, generates oxygen, thank you, green plants in the ocean and on the land, and capture carbon dioxide, creating a cycle that has worked for gazillions of years. But we have come along burning fossil fuels and wood, the forests, and we're burning life in the sea. When we take fish out of the ocean, we're releasing carbon dioxide and undermining the carbon capture mechanisms that have developed over all these many years. The key is now we know, and finding solutions to retrieving the stuff we have put into the ocean, thinking it was a good idea at the time, but now we know. I mean, about a week ago, Boyan Slat, with his big ocean cleanup venture, a kid who had this idea, let's go out and pull back the stuff we've thrown into the ocean. and is igniting people around the world to say, well, what can I do? A kid can dream big and have some consequences. Everybody can do something, but it starts with not putting stuff in the ocean in the first place. And that's the key. Don't let it become the problem, or don't add to the problem. I almost am worried about creating a market for these shoes. We'll continue to put plastic in because we've got to have these shoes. And
I think there's enough plastic out there. We got it covered. But I share your concern. I think part of the collaboration is not only trying to create the demand to pull it out, but also reinvent the way plastic is created. We don't want these materials in the future, so eventually we want to work ourselves out of business of Parley shoes and create ones that are based off of materials that can do the same, but don't have plastic as we know it in them.
I think the combination of what we're putting into the ocean, also what we're taking out of the ocean, has altered the nature, not just of the ocean, but of the planet as a whole. And at the climate summits that are now taking place, I didn't think about the climate when I was a kid or when you were a kid, right. or you. I mean, this is upon us now in recent times. But the kids of today are aware in a way that gives cause for hope. And NAINOA, you have twins, kids who are exposed to new ways of thinking. It just wasn't available to me as a kid. But now we know. Now you know, and I'd love to have you share with those here and those who might be listening in your perspective on the deep view of who we are, where we've come from, where we might be going, and how, at this amazing point in history, we can ignite people around the world. Imagine, all of you who are listening, that you're with NAINOA on his open ocean voyaging canoe with a crew of young kids, youngsters, young people, over the last 3 years voyaging the world. And imagine being there at night, finding the Milky Way. Some of you may have never seen the Milky Way if you've grown up in San Francisco. This is a foggy city. But you've had the privilege of being out in the open ocean with open sky and never for a moment forget that we are a part of this universe, a very special part, our home.
Okay.
Go for it, NAINOA.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for coming. I'm from the Hawaiian Islands, in the middle of the biggest, most powerful, magnificent ocean in the world, even though it's only one ocean on the earth. If we invoke my two 9-year-old twins, much of what I do is out of fear. An unknown future, an island we can't see. How do you sail there? In the storm. Because the health of my children's future is dependent on the health and well-being of the oceans in Hawaii. And so I'm deeply grateful and honored to be here, and I need to say this like Adrian and Alexis did. I'm not a navigator. I'm a student of great navigators and great teachers. I've had the most wonderful life because I spent 35 years with the greatest navigator on earth by the name of Mau Piailuk. He's from the Western Carolines, where there's only 6 navigators that were left on the earth, none in Polynesia, none in Melanesia. And when Hokulea, a voyaging canoe, was constructed, he was the youngest. I didn't find Tahiti, he did. He changed the world, connected indigenous people across the planet. Then he came back with 30 years and trained us. So I know the power of the mentor, and I know the power of teacher. I know the power of good education. And I just want to say that, because it's not so much what I think, it's what I feel, that, the great navigator of the protection of the oceans, that's been spending a lifetime carrying it on her shoulders for the benefit of all of us, and now my children. The great navigator that is tireless, that flies here this morning from New York because she had to meet with Bill Anders, not just the Earthrise, but it's the Earth shot. It's our one shot. Right. And making those connections. I lost my teacher, and he died of diabetes on his island in Satawal, Western Carolina, in 2012 in July. But there's this other teacher that is really my mentor. I don't do much of anything other than hunt around for my teachers, to learn from them, to grow, guide me. And I just want to say, this woman, I have the deepest respect because I know to some tiny little degree of what she carries. Probably the most knowledgeable person about the oceans in the world, the most accomplished diver in the world, and carries because she knows what's happening. So when I look at this audience and I look at the power of this room, that all of you, I don't know you, you're strangers, but I believe that you're here for a reason, that this woman, Sylvia Earle, is a mentor, she's a teacher, and she really is, to me today, the Earth's great navigator. And so to be in the same room with her, along with Adrian and Alexis, it's a deep honor. The question you were asking me, how do I do it quickly? My ancestors sailed the longest voyage in human history from a place called Kaikinui, probably Tahiti, to Hawaii, about 2,000 years ago. It would be the longest 2,400-mile open ocean voyage. And it would be similar to, Apollo 11 landing on the moon. The difference is we know the astronauts' names, but we don't know the name of the canoe, we don't know the name of the navigators, we don't know anything about that voyage because we forgot. And so in the last 200 years, we started to suppress that great knowledge of our ancestors. And the thing that's more important, I think, than the voyaging was really how do you live on the island? When you have large populations in Hawaiian Islands, there's evidence of population crash, that we exceeded what the island could hold, and people died. And then systems are put into place, very strict systems, that held nature first, above mankind. It was the heavens, it was the drop of water, it was the rivers, it was the streams, it was the ocean, and the coral polyp was more important than the human being. That worldview, that we are not above nature, but we are a part of the fabric, that worldview, that our whole existence and our whole well-being for generations to come is dependent on the kinship and relationship to the thing that we call nature. And today, the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Hawaii, 2016, put out a report and said that 20% of the terrestrial lands on the earth is governed by indigenous people, but 81% of intact ecological systems are in the 20%. And so there's a movement that has to go back and look at that issue about, can we be kinship to nature tomorrow? And so at the same time, this kind of work, science and technology is key to the equation, and bringing that all together and bringing a comprehensive viewpoint. The scale that's required is just enormous to crack the code, to make those kinds of changes. My time with my teacher, Mau Piailuk, he's of miracle status. And the things that he carried, because his relationship with nature was so amazing. And I look to tomorrow. There's many, many, many things, and I'll end this quickly. That to what Sylvia was raising about. I was taken to the ocean when I was 5. I've been in it for 6 decades. I've sailed a lot. But my great regret was I was taken to the ocean when the ocean was full of life as a child. My great regret, I watched it all change and couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't believe I could deal with the forces. But one of the issues was because we didn't know, right? We didn't know. So I graduated from high school. There's a language that doesn't exist, but it's going to come. It's called climate change. It's called acidification. It's called heating up, turning up the thermostats on our oceans. It talks about hypoxia, dead zones, and it talks about this issue. How are you going to be sustainable when our population is in exponential growth? Huge challenges. My argument really is to what Adrian was saying. Does humanity still care enough to have the will to make the change that is required? I think the hope is if we change schools, we change the purpose of education. That when I grew up, we didn't know anything about nature because it wasn't taught. The public school system in this country was designed to be the most powerful economy in the world 150 years ago. And the way to do that was to industrialize, and education. Schools, the purpose of schools was to get the workforce. But imagine, what if our whole schools are based on finding the balance of kinship?
So we learn our numbers as kids. We learn our letters as kids, but where, when, how do we learn our relationship with nature, and that with every breath we take, every drop of water we drink, we're connected to the ocean. Even if you've never seen the ocean or touched the ocean, you're being touched by the ocean all the time. Where do we learn? How did you learn the importance of the natural world to your existence? That the most important thing that we take from the ocean is our existence. No ocean, no life. No ocean, no us. And kids, that fortunately, I think, cause for hope. And I'd love to have each of you reflect and share your thoughts about why you are hopeful. Or if you're not, I guess we should know that too. But I hope you're hopeful. And why? But for me, it's the kids. Right. All of us are born knowing nothing. And there was so much that we could not know early in the 20th century and even early in the 21st. There's still so much to learn, but at least we know, beginning to suspect the magnitude of what we don't know and have some respect for that and be more cautious about how much of the natural systems we continue to consume without even knowing how they connect. We know that they do, but how? We don't always have to know exactly how. All we need to know is nature keeps us alive, and we need to return the favor and do what we can, whether it's on the land. I mean, I love the fact that Salesforce, that Mark Benioff and his family are behind the idea of nature, and even as the culture of the Salesforce company, as a company, encouraging people who work here to think differently, and the blue parks that complement the green. I mean, it's the whole natural world. So, Adrian.
Well, I'd say that I'm very optimistic, and it's really a choice, because when we talk about our relationship to nature, there's a humbling aspect to it. When you humble yourself to the system of nature and you realize that you do not have dominion over it, you are part of it. But if you go out in the ocean, if you go out into nature, look out across the big, beautiful sky, you're humbled, right? And I think that's an important first step to becoming part of the solution. Because man, for so long, has had this arrogant sense of himself that he thinks he can control nature, that we can use nature without consequence. But that's just not the case. But I choose to be optimistic because that's full of hope and wonder and opportunity and potential. And that's a very humbling instinct as well, because that means now you have to imagine a better world. You have to imagine what the solutions are. And it's an active thing, because now you have to go build and go create those new systems. When you're pessimistic, it's very cynical, and it implies that you know that we're doomed. But we don't know. And I'm always battling a lot of cynicism out there, because people want to just sit in this dark cloud of doomsday. But we got to get out of that. And we have to realize that we don't know the future. It's not written yet. We can write it in the image of our best selves. And I find, ironically, that there's a lot of this cynicism amongst environmentalists. And I also talk a lot about humbling those environmentalists who arrogantly think that they know the answer. And what that does is it turns people off. And what we need to do is turn people on. We need to, instead of alienating people for having made the wrong choices throughout their lives because they've been trained or inspired, or they're just following the will of the system of capitalism or the way we've been doing things for all these years, we need to understand that they've been making choices not because they're bad people, but because they have not been inspired yet. So I choose to be humble, I choose to be optimistic, and I choose to reach out across the divide and try and bring people who have maybe a different perspective, or who maybe have denied climate change, or who ignore the issues, and I try and get them on my side, and I try and inspire them, because through the act of connecting with others and finding those solutions together, that in and of itself is optimistic and full of potential.
No, good points, and the fact that knowing really is the key. And you can't blame those in the past who did stupid things in ignorance, but there's no excuse anymore.
Right.
Because now the knowledge is there. And having a focus on what we can do to make a difference. If you think it's impossible, it will be impossible, because you won't even try. Your perspective on what...
I think my optimism comes from a very different place. It's shared, but it's from a very different place. And maybe I'm lucky in the fact that I work for a company where we're actively integrating this into our mainstream business. It's into our day job, making sneakers, but at the same time using sneakers as a lever to create a demand, to clean up a problem, and at the same time talk to people about what that problem even is.
And, you know, governments, countries have the power of making policy, but so do companies.
Yep.
Have the power to influence everyone. Marketing good things, marketing good ideas, marketing a way to go from where we are to get to a better place.
And I think my optimism also comes from the fact that we're not the only one in this game. I mean, in fact, if anything, there's been an explosion of companies trying to make solutions for all the problems that we have out there, several of them for ocean solutions and others, and that you're integrating that into your mainstream business. In fact, people are looking to compete on developing the solutions that we need. Al Gore spoke to this morning, and in fact was incredibly optimistic about the fact that people are inventing the solutions now. I interact with people who are developing the startups of tomorrow to be able to create the new algae materials that will be replacements, create the new kinds of plastics that we need, and people who are just going actually into everyday, normal companies like Salesforce and just trying to figure out how they can work it into their day job. And that is a wave that I've seen just getting bigger and bigger over the last 10 years. And it seems to be becoming so normal at this point that it strikes me that everybody is looking to be part of the solution during their more than 40-hour week. And that makes me hopeful that actually the businesses of tomorrow are going to be based on creating the solutions.
So it's more than making money. It's making a difference. And that as a goal of corporations as well as companies, as countries, starting with individuals, starting with kids, and the elders. It's just great that you are recognized as an ocean elder. Who better to be a voice for the ocean than you who have navigated the world now, and another plan for the next 3 years to bring people together throughout the Pacific. And I hope you'll let me come along. I want to see what's under the canoe, down into the depths of the ocean, average depth 4 kilometers, the maximum is 7 kilometers, and you'll probably be sailing right over that deepest place, the Mariana Trench.
We will.
Don't you want to know what's down there?
I do.
So, cause for hope.
To be honest, if I dwell on the data, sometimes I won't get out of bed. Fear will take over me that particular day. But I had great teachers, and I'll just show you one teacher. He's Hawaii's second astronaut into space. Lieutenant Colonel Lacey Veach, best friend. 1992, he flew in the shuttle program, and I met him up on the slopes of Mauna Loa at 6,000-foot elevation on the Black Lava, where we absorb all light and just look at the stars and dream about linking the shuttle and our voyaging canoes, integrating the past into the future, and creating education programs that would inspire young people to explore. And he goes, the Earth shot, William Anderson, he said, "NAINOA, you have no idea how beautiful your island Earth is till you see the whole thing from space. That life is so complex that we don't fully understand it, but what we do know, it's the only place that has life. Why don't we protect it? Sail Hokulea around the world." And we lose him in 1995 to lymphomelanoma. For 16 years, leadership talked about his dream, sail Hokulea around the world. Because he said, you can't protect what you don't understand, and you won't if you don't care. And you can't do it by yourself. You need to link, learn the world, and go find is the culture of humanity still kind enough to care enough. And so we would debate this for 16 years about should we go, oh yeah, let's go with all the leadership in Hawaii. And when we went to, what about the hurricane, what about the pirate, what about the mosquito, what about the rogue wave of South Africa, and then we would all just say, it's too dangerous, until that language that's being created that's going to impact the future. So much of what drives us is, yes, the fear, but the question is, are you going to go? April 1st, 2008, we had a leadership meeting. The question on the agenda was different. It's not whether we're going to go or not. We have to. The question on the table was, what's more dangerous? The pirate, the hurricane, the rogue wave, the mosquito, or staying tied to the dock and do nothing? And then accept, on behalf of the future of your children, that you knew, but ignorance is okay, because it's too dangerous to go. Apathy is okay, and being inactive. So we voted 4 times, unanimous, and we went. What did we find? We found the world has got issues, the data is correct, but at the same time, what we found around the world about the culture that Lacey was talking about, that is not defined by race, or the boundaries of geography, or the boundaries of nationalism, that this culture that he was seeking is a much more human and humane culture, that it's about values, kindness, compassion, caring. Does it exist on the earth? We met thousands and thousands of strangers on a 37-month voyage, 222 ports, 18 countries around the world. That to me, it's not just about hope and optimism, it's the light. It's the light of hope. That strangers that we don't know are doing extraordinary things. It's almost like it's innate, it's almost private, and it's instinctual to protect their home. I think it's instinctual to protect your home. But we're finding that the home is the whole island. And so every time we find someone that is making some act of kindness, compassion in the worst of our slums or in the worst of our schools, in the university systems, on a coral reef, in the watersheds, every time we find someone that's doing an act of kindness in their communities, they're doing it for the community of the earth. So when you add it all up, I believe that my optimism comes from the fact that we saw on this little tiny island Earth the greatest human movement. That is chaotic, it's not organized, and it never should be. That is moving towards the same place, the same island on the horizon where it's going to be good enough for our children. We saw it, and that's what keeps me hopeful, and that's what keeps me strong, and that's why I love the time that we're in and to have my children in it too. Thank you.
Thank all of you. Thank you, NAINOA. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With this vision of what we individually and collectively can do, humans, perhaps uniquely on Earth, can look back in time and know what Earth was like 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 1 billion years ago. We also have the power of anticipating the future. That image of Earth, this is it, our home. Ask yourself, look in the mirror, what is your power, your superpower? And what can you do to go from where we are now to get to a better place? And do not give in to that terrible, terrible feeling of despair. This is the time as never before when we have a chance to get from where we are to the world that we really want, to take care of the systems, the ocean that takes care of us. Thank you.